In the beautiful city of Kitwe, there lived a young man named Solomon. Solomon had a very strong desire for sex. Every night, he felt the urge to find a girl on the streets and take her home with him. He couldn't seem to resist this temptation, and it became a regular part of his routine. He never liked spending a night alone, so he found companionship in this way. Despite being 32 years old and successful in his career, Solomon struggled with a very strong desire for sex. He took his work very seriously and had achieved financial stability, but this aspect of his personal life really troubled him. Although his friends suggested that he settles down and starts a family, Solomon had reservations. He dreamt of marrying a virgin, but he believed it was nearly impossible to find one in the city where he lived. He noticed that many people around were involved in activities like prostitution and casual hookups. On the other side of the city, in a small village called Solwezi, there lived two poor orphaned sisters named Camilla and Mwanza. They struggled to navigate through life, and life was so hard for them. Camilla and Mwanza were two strikingly similar sisters who had been orphaned and relied on each other for support. While they shared a close resemblance, Camilla was 26 years old and Mwanza was just 24 years old. Despite their bond, their path in life was very different. Camilla engaged in prostitution to make ends meet for herself and her sister, while Mwanza was always home trying to look for the best possible way to help out at home because she didn't want to seek that kind of lifestyle. Camilla got really sick one day with malaria and she couldn't do her job anymore. She asked Mwanza to do it instead, but Mwanza said no because she didn't want to have sex with strangers. This made Camilla really mad because she needed the money. She felt like her sister was letting her down. This made Camilla really mad because she felt like Mwanza was not helping them survive like they had planned. Camilla got even more upset and told Mwanza she had to go out to work or move out of the tiny village home they used to stay in. Mwanza didn't want to leave, but she stayed firm and said she wouldn't change her mind because she wanted to keep her virginity and stick to her beliefs and morals. Reluctantly, Mwanza gave in to Camilla's demands. As she got ready to leave, Camilla dressed her in her own clothes, necklaces, bracelets, and earrings before she left. Mwanza dressed in very revealing clothes. She stood by the roadside. While she stood on the roadside, an expensive car pulled up in front of her, and it was Solomon. He asked her how much for a night, and Mwanza, still feeling bitter, reluctantly named the price. Then he invited her to get into the car. Inside the car, Solomon began to touch Mwanza's legs, complimenting her beauty. Despite her irritation, she tried to smile, though her true feelings were evident in her expression. When they arrived at the hotel, Mwanza felt very nervous. Solomon suggested they go to a club to have fun before heading to the room, but Mwanza didn't agree. However, Solomon promised to pay her more money, so she reluctantly accepted. In the club, Solomon offered Mwanza a drink, but she refused because she doesn't drink and she doesn't know much about these kinds of places. Solomon insisted, and eventually Mwanza felt pressured to drink. Mwanza's main reason for being there in the first place was to avoid being kicked out of the house by her sister. Solomon noticed Mwanza's hesitant and timid behavior, and he assumed she was new to this kind of work. Mwanza became very drunk that night and she couldn't function properly. Seeing this, Solomon decided to take her to the room he had arranged for himself and her. He gently placed her on the bed and then left to freshen up himself. Solomon entered the room and tried to wake Mwanza up, but she wasn't responding well due to being heavily intoxicated. He then proceeded to undress both himself and her. Mwanza, in her intoxicated state, managed to protest against Solomon's advances, telling him she was a virgin. However, Solomon dismissed her words, thinking she was just talking because she was drunk. He continued trying to be intimate with her, but Mwanza kept repeating that she was a virgin. Mwanza cried out, "I'm not a prostitute. I just needed this money so my sister won't send me away from her house." Frustrated, Solomon insisted she stops talking and eventually raised his voice, telling her that her payment is on the table and to be quiet. Mwanza finally complied, and Solomon proceeded with his actions despite her continued objections. Solomon had never kissed the street girls before. He just went directly inside them without any type of romance. But this time, he felt like kissing Mwanza. He felt she was special and admired her beautiful face. He kissed and romanced Mwanza. Then he went inside her, though while wearing protection. It was his first time enjoying sex. Her body was tight, not loose like other girls he had been with before. He enjoyed himself before they both slept off. Solomon woke up in the morning expecting to see Mwanza beside him, but she wasn't there. Confused, he looked around the room, but Mwanza was nowhere to be found. As Solomon got out of bed, he noticed bloodstains everywhere, in the sheets, on his body, and around the room. Shocked and alarmed, he realized the significance of the stains and what had likely occurred during the night. Despite his initial admiration for Mwanza, Solomon felt really bad because he realized Mwanza was telling the truth about being a virgin. He regretted taking her virginity for money. As he walked to the bathroom, he saw Mwanza's necklace she left behind. Solomon felt really bad about what happened with Mwanza. He knew he had to find her and apologize, so he quickly got dressed and left the hotel to look for her. Meanwhile, Mwanza woke up feeling confused and ashamed. She left the hotel in a hurry, not wanting to see Solomon or anyone else from that night again. Feeling really down, Mwanza went home. She decided to give back the money Solomon had given her to her sister, Camilla. Camilla felt happy seeing the huge amount because nobody had ever paid her so much for one night's work, even though her sister's face showed she was hurting. Mwanza hissed in pain as she walked slowly, feeling discomfort from her encounter with Solomon. She went into the bathroom to take a bath. Seeing her sister's discomfort, Camilla laughed and told her she'd get used to it if she kept doing that kind of work. From the bathroom, Mwanza rejected Camilla's suggestion firmly, saying she would never do it again. She cried in the shower, feeling cheap and ashamed of what happened the previous night. Meanwhile, Solomon ran to the streets with the necklace, hoping to find Mwanza. But his search was unsuccessful, so he decided to go back home and get ready for work. At work, Solomon couldn't shake off the memory of Mwanza pleading with him, saying she just needed money and wasn't a street girl. The guilt weighed heavily on him, making him restless throughout the day. After work, he hurried to the spot where he had picked Mwanza up, hoping to find her there, but she wasn't there to be seen. Desperate to find her, Solomon described Mwanza to other girls working in the area, but none of them knew her. Solomon realized he didn't know Mwanza's name, phone number, or even where she lived. The only clue he had was the necklace she had left behind in the hotel room. For 2 whole weeks, Solomon searched for Mwanza, and it was the hardest time he'd ever faced in his lifetime. Even though he usually couldn't go a night without being with a woman, he managed to stay away from that for 2 weeks. Mwanza's beauty, her clear skin, and her innocence stuck in Solomon's mind. After his unsuccessful efforts to find Mwanza, Solomon decided to return to his normal routine. One evening, coming back from work, he picked up another street girl from the streets and took her to a hotel. But as soon as she tried to get close to him, it was like he was seeing Mwanza, and he smiled. But when the new girl touched him, he realized she was different and he felt really irritated. This reaction was really unlike Solomon. As Mwanza's image clouded his mind, he offered the street girl money to go home and he decided to hang out with his friends instead. While Solomon was with his friends, he felt down but couldn't bring himself to admit that he was in love with a girl he met on the streets. He knew his friends would tease him about it. One of his friends, Luca, noticed Solomon's mood and tried to cheer him up. When Luca showed him a photo of a beautiful girl on Facebook, Solomon wasn't interested at first, but Luca insisted. When Solomon looked at the photo, he saw Camilla wearing the same necklace that Mwanza had left behind. He asked Luca to send him the screenshot of Camilla's profile. Later, when Solomon was home, he checked Camilla's profile and saw a picture of her that looked a lot like Mwanza, wearing the same necklace. He felt like he had finally found the person he had been looking for more than 2 weeks. Since Camilla's phone number was on her profile, Solomon decided to take note of it. He tried calling Camilla, but she couldn't answer the call. Solomon decided he would try calling her again the next day when he went to work. The next day at work, Solomon called Camilla again and she finally picked up. "Hello," Camilla answered. "Hi, it's Solomon," he said. "I'm really sorry about what happened the other night. I took your virginity just for money, and I feel very terrible about it. I want to see you again and give you back the necklace you left behind." Camilla cleverly realizing Solomon was referring to her sister Mwanza. She played along. She asked Solomon how he got her number and he explained he found it on Facebook. They agreed to meet at the mall to exchange the necklace. At the mall, Solomon and Camilla met up. Although he noticed some differences with Camilla compared to Mwanza, her face was the same. He apologized again and urged her not to go back to the streets. Camilla explained that she had to due to her aunt's demands. "My aunt will send me out of the house if I don't go to the streets," Camilla replied. "I have nowhere else to go or stay." In response, Solomon offered her enough money to find accommodation and start a business so she wouldn't have to return to the streets. Grateful, Camilla accepted and Solomon gave her a check for a large amount of money before they said their goodbyes. When Solomon got home, he felt a difference in his connection with Camilla compared to Mwanza. He couldn't shake the feeling that Camilla seemed more exposed. After thinking it over, he assumed it was because they hadn't seen each other over a long time. Camilla went home feeling incredibly excited. "I've hit the jackpot," she said to herself. "Not only will I not have to live here, but I'll also be able to get a shop and have a handsome and wealthy guy like Solomon." Camilla was on top of the world. A few days later, she started packing her things in the house. When Mwanza asked where she was going, Camilla replied aggressively, "I'm finding my own way. I can't keep staying in this dirty place." Mwanza pleaded with her to at least tell her where she was going, but she refused to share any details. Camilla moved to a new house out of the village and Mwanza was left there all alone, suffering. Camilla started a big clothing and jewelry business. Solomon continues to communicate with Camilla over the phone, and he was happy to hear that she was doing well. However, he still felt like something was missing. Solomon decided to take Camilla to his house and showed her where he lived. And to her surprise, he lived alone. Camilla's eyes widened and she smiled to herself, realizing that her life had changed for the better. Solomon continues to support Camilla financially so that she wouldn't lack anything at all. One day, Solomon arrived at work to find his office in a mess. He called his secretary to inquire why the cleaner hadn't shown up, only to learn that the cleaner had stopped coming. The secretary had quickly tied up the office herself. Solomon instructed her to put up a notice outside the office for the position of a cleaner. Meanwhile, Mwanza had been searching for a job outside of her village near the city because it was difficult for her to make ends meet since Camilla had left her. When she saw the signboard advertising the cleaner position at Solomon's office, she wasted no time and applied for the job. The secretary asked her to start work the next day. Mwanza resumed work late the next day and quickly began sweeping the office. When Solomon entered and saw his dusty table, he instructed his secretary to call the new cleaner to clean his table and mop the floor, which she did. As Solomon turned to make a phone call, Mwanza entered the office to clean the table and chairs. In the process, she accidentally knocked over a file, causing both her and Solomon to bend down to pick it up. Their heads collided, and when they looked at each other, they recognized each other's faces. Shocked to see Solomon, Mwanza tried to run from the office, but Solomon stopped her by holding her waist from behind. Mwanza apologized, saying she was sorry for being late. Solomon saw the innocence on her face, the same innocence he had seen the night they had met. Feeling a deep connection as he touched her, Solomon realized there was something special about Mwanza. He asked her why she was there, after he had opened a big shop for her. Mwanza simply replied, "I'm sorry, sir. Please let me go." While James demanded answers from Mwanza, Camilla called him. They talked while Mwanza was in front of him. After the call, Solomon seemed shocked and asked Mwanza who she was. Mwanza, shivering with fear, pleaded with him to let her go. Solomon assured her that he wouldn't hurt her and persuaded her to sit down. He then asked her if she had a twin, but Mwanza replied that she only had an elder sister who looked exactly like her, and people often mistook them for twins. Still surprised, Solomon asked for her name and she replied, Mwanza. Solomon then showed her the photo Luca had sent him earlier. "This necklace, you forgot it in the hotel room. Is this not you wearing the necklace in this photo?" Solomon asked. Mwanza replied, "That's my elder sister. How did you get her photo on your phone?" Solomon replied, "Never mind," and shifted closer to the chair where Mwanza was sitting. He apologized sincerely for hurting her that night and explained that he had been searching for her ever since. He acknowledged that he had made a mistake by taking her virginity in such a way, and he asked Mwanza to give him a chance to make things right. Mwanza insisted that he hadn't done anything wrong because he had paid for the services. But Solomon continued to plead for her forgiveness. He then asked for her phone number, but Mwanza didn't have a phone. When he requested her address, she explained that the place didn't have an address. Despite their conversation, Mwanza expressed her desire to continue her work because she had other offices to clean. Solomon picked up the rag and threw it away, telling Mwanza that she wouldn't work as a cleaner anymore. He then took her out to buy a phone and accompanied her back home. When they arrived, Solomon noticed photos of Mwanza and Camilla on the wall and the poor condition of the room. As he was going through the photos, the landlord arrived to throw Mwanza's belongings out of the house because she had owned rent for almost 5 months. Despite Solomon's attempt to reason with the landlord, he refused to listen. In response, Solomon gathered Mwanza's belongings and took her to his own home. Mwanza had many emotions when she moved in with Solomon. She was grateful for his help, but she also felt a little too much to handle. Solomon really wanted to assist Mwanza however he could. He noticed that Mwanza seemed uncomfortable staying there for even just a day. So he decided to find her a better place to stay. He called his lawyer to help arrange for the house. While Solomon was talking to his lawyer, Mwanza walked in unexpectedly. Solomon quickly ended the call and told the lawyer he would call back. Curious, Mwanza asked why Solomon was doing so much for her when she had nothing to offer in return. Solomon reassured her that he didn't expect anything in return and just wanted her to relax. But Mwanza, feeling uncertain, suggested that if Solomon brought her here just to be intimate with her, then she couldn't stay. Solomon responded firmly, saying he called his lawyer to find her a better place for accommodation. He confessed his feelings for Mwanza, saying that he liked her a lot and he was even in love with her. However, he emphasized that he wouldn't force her to accept his feelings. Instead, he promised to assist her regardless of their relationship status. The next day, Solomon and Mwanza went to see different apartments. Solomon said he would pay for whichever one Mwanza liked best. They visited a few places, but Mwanza didn't like any of them. Even though the apartments they saw were all nice and costly, Mwanza felt like she could trust Solomon. She felt safe around him and started thinking about staying with him in his house. Solomon and Mwanza went back to his house. He promised they would go apartment hunting again the next day so she could choose one she liked. But Mwanza surprised him by saying she wanted to stay in the house. She asked him to promise not to be physical with her. Solomon smiled with excitement and said, "I'm grateful you trust me. I won't come close except you want me to." Mwanza smiled and replied, "So you still want to get close with my consent?" Solomon responded sarcastically, saying, "Yes, because I love you so much. You changed me. Since that day we met in the hotel, I stopped womanizing. I couldn't go a day without touching a woman, but you indirectly and directly turned me away from all women." Solomon was curious about Mwanza's background, so he asked her to share more about herself. He wanted to know where she grew up, about her family, and what happened that made her end up on the streets that day. Mwanza shared with Solomon that both her parents had passed away a while back, leaving her with just her elder sister. Life in their village was tough, so they decided to move to the city to try to make a living. They had a plan to work hard, but unfortunately, her sister ended up on the streets. Despite this, her sister always took care of the bills. However, on the day Mwanza ended up on the streets, her sister was sick and unable to work. She felt pressure to go out and hustle to make ends meet. Her sister even threatened to kick her out if she couldn't go. With nowhere else to turn, Mwanza had no choice but to join her sister on the street. As Mwanza recounted her story, tears welled up in her eyes. Solomon felt a wave of empathy for her and put her into a comforting embrace as he cried while sharing her difficult experience. Mwanza also asked Solomon why he was womanizing. He explained that many women were interested in him because of his money, and some even deceived him. Since then, he felt that instead of being with women who were only interested in his wealth, it would be better to pick girls from the streets. He believed that they might be more genuine and not after his money. Mwanza comforted Solomon, and they shared a comforting hug. Meanwhile, it had been a week since Camilla had been trying to reach Solomon. But he refused to answer her calls because he knew she was an imposter. Despite his avoidance, Camilla decided to pay him a visit at his house. Mwanza and Solomon had become good friends after their heart-to-heart talk. Mwanza felt safer with him, and he appreciated her trust. One day, while they were relaxing at Solomon's house, there was a knock on the door. Solomon went to answer it, and to Mwanza's surprise, it was Camilla. Camilla looked shocked to see Mwanza in Solomon's house. She looked at Mwanza suspiciously. "Why are you here?" she asked sharply. Mwanza felt scared. "I am staying with Solomon," she said quietly. Camilla softened a little but still seemed angry. "Why?" she asked. Mwanza glanced at Solomon for help. "Solomon is helping me find a place to stay," she explained. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." Camilla seemed a bit calmer. Then she turned to Solomon, looking angry again. "Why did you bring her here?" she demanded. Solomon sighed. "I'm helping Mwanza," he said. "She needed a place to stay." Solomon, with a serious look, "Since you left her and you are pretending to be her," he said. Mwanza furrowed her brows in confusion. Pretending to be her? She asked, puzzled. Solomon explained how Camilla had pretended to be Mwanza, but he was relieved that he finally found the real Mwanza. Before Mwanza could fully understand, Camilla tried to pull her away, insisting they go to her house, but Mwanza refused and Solomon stepped in to protect her. "Leave her alone, Camilla," Solomon said firmly. Camilla glared at Mwanza, threatening to deal with her later, before storming out of the house, feeling furious that Mwanza might take Solomon away from her. When Camilla got home, she decided to visit her uncles and aunts in the village to seek their help in evicting Mwanza from Solomon's house. So, she journeyed to the village and lied to her relatives, who had never helped her or Mwanza before, to come and take Mwanza away from Solomon. They all agreed and arrived in the city, and Camilla took them to Solomon's house, but unfortunately he wasn't there. Mwanza opened the door and welcomed them in. The aunts and uncles entered the house, knowing Solomon would be a very rich man, so they wanted to strike a deal that would benefit them, not Camilla. The aunts and uncles spoke amongst themselves and agreed to wait for Solomon to return. However, Camilla was impatient and wanted them to forcefully remove Mwanza from the house. But because of their own selfish interests, they realized that if they took Mwanza out and Solomon returned without seeing her, he might file a police report against them. Mwanza decided to call Solomon to come home due to an emergency, and he rushed home only to find a lot of strangers in his house. He greeted them and they introduced themselves as Mwanza's paternal relatives. They told Solomon they came to take Mwanza away because it was against their tradition for a girl to stay in the same house with a man who wasn't her husband. Solomon replied, "I'm sorry about breaking your tradition, but I would really love to marry Mwanza." When Camilla heard this, she got very angry. The uncles and aunts replied to Solomon, "Now you are talking." They invited Solomon to their village to take the list for marrying arrangements. Camilla told her uncles and aunts that this wasn't the reason she invited them. She invited them to evict Mwanza from the house, but now they were arranging a marriage. Solomon promised Mwanza's family that he would come to their village in 3 days' time to take the list and make necessary arrangements. Mwanza's paternal family were happy and he gave them a large sum of money to cover their transportation expenses home. This made Camilla very angry and furious because her plans had backfired on her. After Camilla and her relatives left Solomon's house, Mwanza confronted him about why he had promised to go to a village and take the marriage list without asking for her consent first. Solomon replied, "That's the best thing I could think of." Mwanza became angry and stormed out of the sitting room after a heated argument with Solomon. Solomon went to her room to talk to her, expressing his deep feelings and desire to be her husband. He pleaded with her, telling her that he loved her and promised never to hurt her again. But Mwanza refused, and Solomon, feeling defeated, told her he would return to his old ways. He left her room, but Mwanza ran after him and held him from behind, telling him not to go. She refused that she really liked him too and had grown to love him. Finally, she agreed to marry him. Hearing Mwanza's words made Solomon incredibly happy. He hugged her tightly and kissed her forehead. Meanwhile, Camilla was at home worrying about what to do next since her plan had failed. She couldn't let Mwanza have such a rich man to herself, so she began plotting her next move. Camilla decided to call Mwanza on the phone to let her know how Solomon was hiding a very big secret from her. Mwanza demanded to know, but Camilla said she would give her the whole details later. But this information really got Mwanza worried. Mwanza and Solomon planned to visit her hometown to get the marriage list. Even though Mwanza was worried, Solomon took her to meet his uncle first and other family members. Mwanza liked spending time with Solomon's family. They also welcomed her as well.
When they started their journey to Mwanza's hometown, she couldn't stop worrying. She tried to be happy, but the fear stayed with her. Solomon tried to cheer her up, but she felt scared. One day, while Mwanza was out, Camilla called again. Her voice this time was very serious, and Mwanza knew something was wrong. Camilla told her that Solomon was hiding something big from her. He had HIV. Mwanza felt shocked and sad hearing this information, not knowing Solomon had kept this from her. She knew she had to talk to him and find out the truth. She couldn't believe it without hearing Solomon's side of the story. Once she got home, she hurried to Solomon's room to talk to him, but as she approached, she overheard him talking on the phone. He sounded very urgent, saying he needed medicine because he was very sick. Mwanza's heart sank as she listened in shock. She felt like Camilla's words had been confirmed, and she believed Solomon did really have HIV. Just like Camilla said, feeling betrayed and hurt, she quietly retreated to her room, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe that Solomon had kept such a big secret from her, especially after knowing he was sick. She felt like she had been kept in the dark, and the realization left her feeling broken and alone. Meanwhile, the medicine Solomon urgently needed was actually for his uncle, who was too unwell to accompany them for the marriage arrangements. Solomon worried about his uncle's health, explaining the urgency to the pharmacist, asking for the medicine as quickly as possible. However, Mwanza overheard only part of the conversation and she misunderstood everything. She assumed Solomon was referring to himself as being sick and urgently needing medicine. This misunderstanding deepened her belief that Solomon had been hiding his HIV status from her. Feeling hurt and betrayed, she couldn't bring herself to confront him about what she heard. She struggled with the weight of her emotions, torn between her love for him and the fear of what his secret might mean for their future together. Mwanza called Camilla and told her that Solomon was really having the virus. Even though Camilla knew it wasn't true, she acted like she believed Mwanza. Camilla told her to leave the house right away because she was worried Solomon might give her the virus. Feeling scared and confused, Mwanza agreed to leave that night. She promised to meet Camilla outside and they would run away together. Mwanza felt torn between her love for Solomon and her fear for her own safety. She knew leaving Solomon would be hard, but she was also afraid of what might happen if they stayed. Throughout the day, Mwanza acted distant and uneasy around Solomon. He noticed her strange behavior and asked her what was wrong, but Mwanza brushed it off and didn't say anything. As night fell, Mwanza quietly packed some of her belongings and headed towards the door, intending to leave without Solomon noticing. However, unknown to her, Solomon was outside making phone calls. Just as Mwanza reached the door, Solomon called out her name, startling her. He asked her where she was going with her bags at this late hour. Mwanza felt shocked and caught off guard, but she knew she couldn't hide the truth from Solomon any longer. With a heavy heart, Mwanza decided to confront him. She told him that she shouldn't marry him because he had lied to her and kept something very important. She accused him of having HIV and not telling her about it, despite their plans for marriage. "Mwanza, where did you hear that from?" said Solomon. "Why didn't you just ask me instead of living like this?" Mwanza replied, "Camilla told me. When I came to your room to ask you, I overheard you urgently asking for medicine on the phone, saying you were very sick." Solomon laughed. "That medicine was for my uncle. I only told the pharmacy so they could bring it quickly, so that my uncle could get well and join us for the wedding. You trust Camilla more than me. It's fine, you can go. If you believe I've been keeping things from you, just leave. I don't want to be with someone who doesn't trust me. I've shown you how much I care and love you, but you've taken me for granted." Mwanza felt the sincerity and hurt in Solomon's voice, realizing she needed to apologize. She tried to enter Solomon's room, but then Camilla called. Mwanza ignored the call and tried to turn off her phone. She went to Solomon's room to ask for forgiveness, but he told her to leave or he will leave instead. Mwanza approached him and hugged him from behind romantically, but Solomon remained upset. Mwanza turned Solomon around and hugged him, apologizing and promising that the incident won't happen again. She kissed his forehead and reassured him. Solomon responded saying a mere kiss on the forehead won't suffice. He needed more to forgive her. Mwanza, feeling shy, asked, "What more do you want?" Solomon held her cheeks and said, "I just want you to love me and trust me." Mwanza thought Solomon was going to talk about intimacy, but he actually said the opposite. Solomon assured her, "I won't force you. If you want us to be intimate, it will be with your consent." Mwanza grinned mischievously and said, "I give my consent, but you have to catch me first." With that, she dashed out of the room and Solomon ran after her. They played a game of hide and seek, and laughter was filling the air as they chased each other around the house. After a while, they both grew tired from the playful pursuit and settled down on the couch in the sitting room. Solomon and Mwanza sat close together on the couch, holding hands. Feeling a rush of affection, Mwanza leaned in and kissed Solomon softly. He responded with equal warmth, their lips meeting in a gentle embrace. Encouraged by her boldness, Mwanza guided Solomon's hand to her cheek. Relishing the touch, Solomon, drawn to her longing gaze, drew nearer, his kisses becoming more intense. Each kiss deepened their connection. Mwanza's heart raced as Solomon's hand explored her body tenderly, sending shivers down her spine. With whispered words of love, Mwanza led Solomon to the bedroom, their movements filled with passion and closeness as they gave in to their desires. Their love-making became a beautiful expression of their love and affection, each moment affirming their bond. Meanwhile, Camilla grew tired of waiting for Mwanza outside Solomon's compound. Feeling frustrated and impatient, she decided to leave. Solomon woke up very early that day and he made something special for Mwanza. He decided to make breakfast for her. He went to the kitchen and found some eggs, breads, and fruits. He made scrambled eggs and toasts. He also cut some fruits to put on the side. After preparing the breakfast, he carried it carefully to his room. He wanted to surprise her with breakfast in bed. Mwanza was still asleep when he entered the room. Solomon gently woke her up and presented the breakfast to her. She was very surprised and delighted by Solomon's thoughtful gesture. They enjoyed the breakfast together in bed, starting their day with happiness. After they finished eating, Solomon told Mwanza that she should rest for a bit. He told her that he would come back later in the afternoon to pick her up. They had plans to go together to select outfits for their upcoming wedding. Solomon wanted Mwanza to feel refreshed and ready for their outing, so he encouraged her to take some time to relax before their shopping trip. Mwanza agreed, feeling grateful for Solomon's considerate nature, and settled back into bed for a little while longer. While Solomon on his way to work, he decided to call Camilla and have a serious conversation with her. He warned her to stay away from Mwanza and him, as he sensed some tension building up between them. Camilla responded by saying that the only way she would consider staying away from Mwanza was if Solomon paid her off. Shocked by Camilla's demand, Solomon asked how much money she needed. To his disbelief, Camilla replied that she also wanted to have a one-night stand with him, in addition to the money. Solomon was appalled and firmly rejected her proposal, telling her she was out of her mind. In a desperate attempt to manipulate Solomon, Camilla threatened that if he didn't agree to her terms, he wouldn't be able to marry Mwanza. She even went as far as claiming that Solomon should be grateful to her. If she hadn't forced Mwanza outside that night, he wouldn't have had the chance to see her. Feeling frustrated and angry, Solomon couldn't help but express his disappointment in Camilla's behavior. He reminded her that instead of being happy for her sister, she is turning herself into a villain by trying to control their lives in such a manipulative way. Solomon let out a sigh and hissed, and he ended the call. Camilla called Solomon back. This time, she changed her mind and didn't just want a one night with him anymore. Instead, she wanted Solomon to make her pregnant and give her money so she could leave town. Camilla said no one would marry her because everyone knew about her past on the streets. She blamed Mwanza for wanting to leave her behind now that she found someone rich. Camilla threatened to make Solomon and Mwanza's lives unhappy if he didn't agree. Solomon was very angry. He told Camilla to leave him alone, and he said he wouldn't give her anything. He wanted her to stay away from Mwanza. Then he ended the call. Later that afternoon, Solomon arrived to pick up Mwanza. They went shopping for things they needed for the wedding. On the day of the wedding, Solomon made sure there were security measures in place to prevent anything from going wrong. Despite Camilla's attempts to sabotage the wedding, Solomon's security measures thwarted all her plans. The wedding proceeded smoothly and Solomon and Mwanza were successfully married. They returned to the city as a happily married couple. Camilla was deeply hurt by Solomon marrying Mwanza. Fueled by anger, she began to destroy everything in her house. She felt betrayed, thinking, I sacrificed so much for Mwanza and now I have neither a man nor money. It would be better if Solomon dies so we could be even. She vowed not to let them be happy, believing that if she had no husband, Mwanza shouldn't have one either. With a bitter laugh, she expressed her resentment. Meanwhile, the newly wedded couple enjoyed their moments of happiness together as they celebrated their marriage. The following day, Mwanza woke up feeling very scared. She had a very bad dream and she dreamt that her husband Solomon got killed. She shouted out loud and Solomon woke up too. He asked her what was wrong and Mwanza hugged him tight and said she had a scary dream where he got killed. She didn't want him to go out that day, so she just wanted him to stay with her. Solomon hugged her back and told her not to worry. He said it was just a dream and he had to go to work. It had been a month since they got married and he needed to earn money after spending a lot on the wedding. Even though Mwanza didn't want him to go, Solomon had to leave. He promised to come back safely. Mwanza watched him go, feeling sad but hoping he would be okay. Solomon got into his car and started driving to the office. Along the way, he spotted two men fighting in the middle of the road. He honked his horn, hoping they would stop, but they ignored him. Feeling concerned, Solomon decided to step out of his car to intervene and separate them. However, he didn't realize that these men were actually goons hired by Camilla. As Solomon approached them, the goons revealed guns hidden in their pockets and threatened to shoot him if he didn't follow them. Terrified, Solomon complied and followed them. They led him to a secluded area in the bush. Once they were alone, the goons mercilessly beat Solomon up while Camilla watched, laughing at his plight. Solomon pleaded with Camilla, begging her to spare his life for Mwanza's sake. But Camilla, fueled by anger and resentment, coldly refused. She declared that if she couldn't be happy, then Mwanza shouldn't be either. With Solomon pleading for mercy falling on deaf ears, the goons dug a shallow grave and buried him alive. Camilla and the goons then left the bush, leaving Solomon trapped and fighting for his life beneath the earth. Two people passing by saw what was happening. They immediately rushed to the grave and started digging Solomon out after Camilla and the goons left. They walked quickly knowing that time was running out. Finally, they managed to free Solomon from the makeshift grave and carried him to a nearby hospital as fast as they could. In the hospital, doctors and nurses worked urgently to save Solomon's life. They treated his injuries and worked to stabilize him. Despite the severity of his condition, they were determined to do everything they could to ensure that Solomon survived. As Solomon lay in the hospital bed fighting for his life, Mwanza was really worried at home. She couldn't stop thinking about the scary dream she had. She tried calling Solomon, but he didn't answer. So she went to his office, but they told her he wasn't there. This made Mwanza even more worried. She felt like something bad might have happened to Solomon. She decided she had to find out where he was and what was going on. Mwanza called Solomon's uncle and shared her worries with him, telling him about the scary dream she had. She explained that she couldn't reach Solomon because his phones were off, and he wasn't at home or work either. He wasn't at home or at work either. Solomon's uncles tried to calm her down and told her to wait until evening for news. But as the evening came with no word from Solomon, Mwanza's anxiety became unbearable. She and Solomon's uncle decided to go to the police station to report his disappearance. Meanwhile, Camilla celebrated her victory, knowing that she had caused pain and suffering from Mwanza. Mwanza couldn't sleep all night because she was worried about her missing husband. She called Camilla to tell her what happened, hoping for some comfort, but Camilla pretended to be sympathetic, even though she was secretly happy that Solomon was gone. The next morning, the police told Mwanza they found Solomon's car on the road, but he wasn't there. This made Mwanza even more scared. She cried and blamed herself for not convincing Solomon to stay home. Meanwhile, Solomon woke up in the hospital after 4 days of being unconscious. When Solomon woke up, he immediately thought about Mwanza. He was worried if she was okay. He wanted to get up, but the nurse said he needed to rest. So he asked the nurse if he could use her phone to call his uncle. Solomon called his uncle and told him everything about what happened to him. He asked his uncle to make sure Mwanza was safe. His uncle actually said Mwanza was currently with him at his house. Solomon begged his uncle to keep Mwanza safe and not let her leave because he thought she might be in danger. He also asked his uncle not to tell anyone where he was until he got better and could go home. After the call, Solomon asked the nurse how he ended up in the hospital. The nurse explained that some people had brought him in. They had found him buried alive, but thankfully they had saved him just in time. Solomon was grateful and wanted to thank them personally. He asked the nurse if he could meet them, but she said she would let him know if they came around. Solomon nodded, relieved to know he had been rescued and eager to express his gratitude to his rescuers. That evening, Camilla called Mwanza to ask if there was any news about Solomon. Mwanza replied that there was no news yet. This made Camilla very happy, but she pretended to be concerned and comforted Mwanza. She promised to visit her soon. However, Mwanza mentioned that she was staying at her in-laws' place, not at home, in case Camilla wanted to come over. Camilla assured Mwanza that she would visit her whenever she returned home. After hanging up the call, Camilla couldn't contain her excitement. Seeing Mwanza sad brought her joy. "You want to enjoy when I sacrificed my body for you to eat?" she muttered to herself. After a month of recovery, Solomon returned to his base. He visited his uncle's place secretly at night, and when Mwanza saw him, she couldn't contain her joy. It was as if her life had returned back to her body. She hugged Solomon tightly and asked him why he had left her like that. Solomon explained everything that had happened to him, detailing Camilla and her accomplices' actions. Hearing this from Solomon, Mwanza was shocked that her own sister could do such a thing to her husband. After much talking, she took Solomon to her room in her in-laws' house. There, she gave Solomon good news. She was actually expecting their child. This news brought additional joy to Solomon's mind. He hugged her close, feeling safe and loved. The next day, Solomon, his uncle, and the police went to Camilla's house to capture her. When Camilla saw Solomon, she was shocked to see him alive. She asked Solomon how he had survived, but he just hissed in response and distracted the police to take her away. Despite her attempts to flee, the police managed to capture her. She then led the police to where her accomplices were hiding. The police apprehended them all. The case was taken to court, and after much deliberation, Camilla and her accomplices were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Justice was served, and Solomon could finally rest, assured that they would never be able to harm anyone else again. Camilla's regrets came too late, and she realized she was in the wrong place. Despite feeling remorse for her actions, she understood that her regret couldn't undo the harm she had caused. Now facing the consequences of her choices, she grappled with the weight of her decisions. However, it was a harsh lesson learned too late, and she had to come to terms with the irreversible consequences of her actions. After some months, Mwanza welcomed a beautiful bouncing baby boy, who was a carbon copy of his dad, Solomon. Overjoyed by their new addition to the family, Solomon couldn't help but appreciate Mwanza for entering his life and transforming him from a womanizer into a more responsible person. In return, Solomon surprised Mwanza with a luxurious shop fully stocked with goods. Mwanza was overwhelmed with joy and gratitude, thanking Solomon for coming into her life and helping her become a better person. She appreciated that Solomon didn't judge her from their one-night stand, but instead supported her and stood by her side through thick and thin. Together, they embraced their new roles as parents and cherished the love and bond they shared as a family. That's it for this story. I hope you really enjoyed. And I think one important lesson that I personally picked from the story is that whatever you try to do to bring someone down, just know and just remember that it is going to backfire. Whether you like it or not, when you give hate, it is going to be multiplied. If you give love, it is going to be multiplied. And you know what? Just be happy for the other person. We all go through tough times in life. We all pass through challenges. But if you see someone happy, it doesn't mean that your happiness won't come. You know, just work towards being a good person and let people be. Jealousy will kill you. Thank you very much for watching, and I want you to tell me the lessons that you've learned from the story. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.